The phone rang late in the evening, interrupting the steady rhythm of rain drumming against the office window. My desk was cluttered with cold cases, loose papers, and a cup of coffee gone stale hours ago. I wasn't in the mood for another job, but when you've been a detective for as long as I have, you learn to recognize the calls that matter. "Detective Hayes," I answered, my voice gruff with exhaustion. "This is Sheriff Danner, Cedar Ridge. We've got a situation out here." The voice on the other end was rough and no-nonsense, a tone that told me this wasn't the kind of case they could handle on their own. 3 people missing in the last month. All disappeared near the forest's edge. We've searched the trails, brought in the dogs, but there's no trace of them. Nothing. "Runaways?" I asked, already guessing the answer. "No." He hesitated, the silence on the line heavy with unspoken tension. "The locals think it's the Shadow." I paused. The Shadow. It wasn't the first time I'd heard the name, though I'd always dismissed it as small-town superstition. Stories about a creature part man, part animal that stalked the forests of the Pacific Northwest. "You're calling me because of a campfire story?" "No," Danner snapped, his frustration clear. "I'm calling you because families are scared, and because whatever's out there isn't a story. It's real enough to take people." I wanted to laugh, to brush him off and hang up, but something in his voice stopped me. It wasn't fear exactly, it was weariness, the kind that comes from seeing too much and finding no answers. Against my better judgment, I agreed to take the case. The next morning, I packed my truck with a map, a flashlight, and my old service pistol. I told myself it was just another missing persons case. A part of me even believed it. Cedar Ridge wasn't the kind of place you'd find on a map unless you were looking for it. A single road wound through the heart of the town, flanked by weathered wooden buildings and a few lonely streetlights. When I pulled in, the rain had let up, but the air was thick with the smell of damp earth and pine. The locals didn't bother hiding their curiosity. As I parked in front of the sheriff's office, I felt their eyes on me, watchful, wary. Inside, Sheriff Danner was waiting. He was older than I'd imagined, his grey hair cropped short and his uniform neat, despite the exhaustion etched into his face. "Thanks for coming," he said, shaking my hand with a grip that was firm but tired. He wasted no time, pulling out a folder filled with photos and notes. "Mary Wilkes was the first," he began, sliding a photo across the desk. It showed a smiling woman in her 30s, her dark hair pulled back into a ponytail. She was out walking her dog near the eastern ridge. Dog came back. She didn't. Next was Caleb Mason, a logger. His photo showed a burly man with a beard thick enough to hide half his face. His crew said he went out to check on some broken equipment and never came back. They heard him scream, but by the time they got to him, there was nothing but his hard hat lying in the dirt. Finally, there was Ellie Turner, just 15. Her photo showed a girl with braces and shy eyes. She was out collecting firewood with her dad. He heard her scream, dropped everything, and ran. By the time he got there, she was gone. Danner leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. "We found her jacket near the edge of the forest, torn clean in two, no blood, no tracks, just gone." I flipped through the file, my unease growing with each detail. "And you're sure this isn't just a case of wild animals or bad weather?" "If it was, I wouldn't have called you," he said. His voice dropped. "Whatever this is, it's not natural." The eastern ridge was a 2-hour hike from the edge of town, a narrow trail cutting through a forest so dense it felt like stepping into another world. The trees were massive, their thick trunks rising like pillars into a canopy that blocked out the sun. The air was cool and damp, carrying the faint scent of moss and decay. I'd spent enough time in the wilderness to know its sounds, the rustle of leaves, the chirping of birds, the occasional snap of a branch underfoot. But as I moved deeper into the forest, those sounds began to fade. The birdsong grew distant, the rustling stilled. It wasn't silence exactly, but it was close enough to make my skin crawl. About a mile in, I found something unusual. A footprint, if you could call it that, pressed deep into the mud. It was massive, easily twice the size of my own boot, and shaped in a way that didn't match any animal I could name. The toes were long, spread wide like a primate's, and the depth of the print suggested something heavy, too heavy to be human. I crouched to examine it, running my fingers over the edges. The mud was fresh, the print crisp. Whatever had made it had passed through here recently. I followed the tracks as they wound deeper into the forest, my pulse quickening with every step. The trail led me to a clearing, where the trees gave way to a circle of broken branches and trampled grass. At the center was a pile of bones, animal bones mostly, but among them were things that didn't belong. A scrap of fabric, a shoe. I swallowed hard, my stomach twisting. I'd seen death before, but this was different. There was a deliberateness to it, an arrangement that felt almost ritualistic. I scanned the tree line, my hand instinctively moving to the pistol at my side. The forest was still, but the air felt wrong-heavy, charged, like the moment before a storm. I decided to set up camp near the edge of the clearing, though every instinct told me to leave. I told myself it was for the case that I needed to stay, to investigate. But the truth was I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. As night fell, the forest came alive with sounds I couldn't explain. Branches snapped in the distance, the noise sharp and deliberate. A low growl echoed through the trees, so deep it seemed to vibrate in my chest. I sat by the fire, my back to the tent, the pistol resting in my lap. The shadows cast by the flames danced across the clearing, creating shapes that moved and shifted like living things. My flashlight sat beside me, its beam cutting through the darkness whenever I heard a sound. Around midnight, the breathing started. It was faint at first, barely audible over the crackle of the fire, but as the minutes passed, it grew louder, closer. It wasn't human. It was too deep, too guttural. I gripped the pistol tightly, scanning the darkness with my flashlight. The beam caught nothing but trees and shadows. And then I saw them, two glowing yellow eyes staring at me from the edge of the clearing. The eyes didn't blink. They stared, unflinching, as if testing me, waiting for me to make the first move. My hand shook as I aimed the flashlight in their direction, but it did little to pierce the suffocating darkness. The eyes stayed put, hovering in the void just beyond the firelight. I couldn't see a body, only the faint suggestion of movement-shifting shadows, the subtle creak of branches bending under weight. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice steady despite the icy knot forming in my stomach. There was no response, no sound except the low, rhythmic breathing that now seemed to fill the clearing. I didn't sleep that night. The eyes stayed until dawn, vanishing just as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the canopy. By then my nerves were frayed, my body aching from the tension of staying awake, my hand clutching the pistol all night. But I wasn't about to leave. I had to know what I was dealing with. At first light, I followed the trail again, my steps cautious and deliberate. The forest had taken on a new character in the daylight, less oppressive, but no less strange. The prints I'd found the day before were joined by others, a crisscrossing network of tracks that led deeper into the woods. After hours of trekking, the air grew colder, the trees more tightly packed. The trail ended abruptly at the mouth of a cave, hidden behind a wall of moss and vines. The opening was wide enough to walk through, its jagged edges giving it the appearance of a gaping maw. The stench hit me immediately, a foul mix of decay and damp earth. My flashlight illuminated the interior, revealing walls slick with moisture and a floor littered with debris. But it wasn't just rocks and branches, bones scattered in piles, their yellowed surfaces gleaming under the beam of light. Animal bones, mostly deer, rabbits, smaller creatures I couldn't identify. But among them were things that didn't belong: a shoe, a torn scrap of fabric, a watch, its face cracked but still recognizable. My stomach twisted as I realized what I was looking at. This wasn't just a cave, it was a graveyard, and it wasn't an accident. The bones were arranged in crude piles, some marked with deep gouges as if they'd been gnawed or scratched. Symbols were etched into the wall spirals, jagged lines and crude figures that seemed to depict something towering over smaller shapes. I took out my phone, snapping photos as quickly as I could. The need to document this overrode the primal urge to flee. Whatever had done this, it wasn't just an animal. It was something deliberate. As I moved deeper into the cave, the air grew colder still, and the sense of being watched returned with a vengeance. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but curiosity and stubbornness kept me going. That's when I heard it, a low, guttural growl that reverberated through the stone walls. My flashlight flickered, and for a terrifying moment the cave was plunged into darkness. When the light returned, I wasn't alone. The creature stood at the far end of the cavern, its massive frame hunched to fit the low ceiling. Its fur was matted, its limbs impossibly long and thick with muscle. But it was the face that stopped me cold somewhere between ape and man, its features twisted into something both familiar and utterly alien. It didn't lunge, it didn't growl again, it simply stared, its glowing yellow eyes boring into mine. And then, as if deciding I wasn't worth the effort, it turned and disappeared into the shadows. I don't remember leaving the cave. My body moved on instinct, my legs carrying me through the forest with reckless speed. The only thing I remember clearly is the overwhelming sense of being followed. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves sent my heart racing. The forest seemed alive now, conspiring against me, its dense foliage closing in on all sides. I stumbled over roots, my breath coming in ragged gasps, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. By the time I reached the clearing where I'd camped the night before, the sun was high in the sky. The fire had long since gone out, but the clearing itself was untouched. No footprints, no signs of disturbance. If it weren't for the lingering sense of dread, I might have convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. I packed my gear in silence, my hands shaking as I shoved everything into my bag. I was ready to leave, to abandon the case and get as far from Cedar Ridge as possible. But as I slung my bag over my shoulder, I noticed something. A single footprint pressed deep into the soft earth at the edge of the clearing. Larger than any I'd seen before, I stared at it for a long time, my mind racing. It wasn't just the size of the print that unnerved me, it was the placement. It was facing toward my tent, as if whatever had made it had been standing there, watching me while I slept. I thought of the creature's eyes, the way they'd stayed fixed on me all night, unblinking. It hadn't attacked. It hadn't even moved. It had just watched. I should have left then, but I didn't. Something about the footprint felt like a challenge, a dare I couldn't ignore. I had to know what this thing was, even if it killed me. I didn't return to Cedar Ridge that day. Against all reason, I ventured deeper into the forest, driven by a mixture of morbid curiosity and something else, a pull I couldn't explain, as if the forest itself was drawing me in. The footprint near my tent had set something in motion, a feeling that I wasn't just chasing the creature anymore. It was waiting for me. The sun hung low in the sky as I picked up the trail again, following the massive prints that wove through the underbrush. The forest grew darker with every step, the towering pines blocking out more light until it felt like I was walking through twilight. The air was heavy, charged with an energy that made my skin prickle. Around midday, I stumbled upon another clearing. This one wasn't like the first, it was empty, devoid of the bones and debris that marked the creature's presence. But there was something unnerving about its perfect stillness. The trees around the edges were unnaturally bent, their branches twisting toward the center like they were reaching for something. The ground was soft and spongy underfoot, the moss so thick it muffled my footsteps. As I stepped into the clearing, the oppressive feeling I'd carried since entering the forest grew stronger. My head throbbed, my chest tightening as if the air itself was turning against me. I dropped my bag and scanned the tree line, my fingers tightening around the flashlight. That's when I heard it. A voice. Faint at first, barely more than a whisper carried on the wind. But it grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't one voice, it was many, overlapping in a cacophony of unintelligible words. I spun in a circle, the flashlight darting through the trees, but there was no one there. The voices rose to a deafening crescendo, and for a moment I thought I was losing my mind. Then they stopped, as abruptly as they'd started, leaving the clearing in silence. I didn't have time to process what had just happened. The growl came next, low and rumbling, vibrating through the ground beneath my feet. I turned toward the sound and saw it. The creature stood at the edge of the clearing, its massive form partially obscured by the shadows of the trees. But this time, it wasn't alone. Behind it, barely visible in the dim light, were more figures. They moved in unison, their eyes glowing faintly as they watched me. I didn't wait for them to move. I ran, my instincts taking over as adrenaline flooded my veins. The forest blurred around me, the trees twisting into jagged shapes that clawed at my skin as I crashed through the underbrush. Behind me, the sounds of pursuit were deafening, branches snapping, guttural snarls, the pounding of heavy footsteps that seemed to shake the ground itself. The creatures weren't just chasing me, they were herding me, driving me deeper into the forest. My lungs burned as I pushed myself harder, the weight of my bag dragging me down. I knew I couldn't outrun them, not for long. My only chance was to lose them, to find some way to throw them off my trail. But the forest offered no refuge, no place to hide. Every step felt like it brought me closer to something worse than death. I stumbled into another clearing, this one dominated by a massive tree that rose higher than any I'd seen before. Its gnarled trunk was carved with the same strange symbols I'd found in the cave, spirals and jagged lines that seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light. Desperation drove me to climb, my hands and feet scrambling for purchase on the rough bark. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The snarls and growls were too close, the sounds of the creatures breaking through the tree line sending waves of panic through me. I reached a thick branch about 20 feet up and clung to it, my chest heaving as I tried to catch my breath. Below me, the creatures circled the base of the tree, their glowing eyes fixed on me. There were at least 5 of them now, their forms shifting in and out of the shadows like they were part of the forest itself. For hours they stayed there, pacing and snarling, their movements deliberate and calculated. They weren't just animals, they were something far worse. And they were waiting for me to come down. Night fell, and the forest came alive with sounds I didn't recognize. Whispers in the wind, the crackle of unseen fires, the distant echo of laughter that sent chills down my spine. The creatures didn't leave. They stayed beneath the tree, their eyes glowing like embers in the darkness. I was trapped. My flashlight had died hours ago, leaving me in near-total darkness. My pistol felt useless against things that seemed to defy the laws of nature. All I could do was wait and hope that the dawn would bring some reprieve. But the dawn never came. The forest stayed dark, the oppressive canopy blocking out any hint of light. Time lost all meaning as I clung to the branch, my body aching from the strain. The creatures grew bolder, their snarls turning into guttural, almost human-like sounds. And then, as if on some unspoken command, they stopped. The silence was worse than the noise. I felt it before I saw it. A presence, heavier and more menacing than anything I'd encountered so far. The trees bent toward the clearing, their branches quivering as if in anticipation. The air grew colder, the chills seeping into my bones. And then it appeared. The thing that stepped into the clearing wasn't like the others. It was larger, its form more distinct. Its fur was blacker than the shadows around it, its eyes burning with an intensity that made me feel like it could see straight through me. It didn't look up at first. It didn't need to. The power it radiated was enough to make me feel like I was nothing more than an insect beneath its gaze. When it finally did look up, I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. Its face was more human than the others, its features twisted into a grotesque mockery of something recognizable. It opened its mouth, and the sound that emerged was unlike anything I'd ever heard. A roar, a scream, and a laugh all at once, a sound that filled the clearing and echoed through the forest. I don't know how I survived that night. Maybe the creatures lost interest, or maybe they were playing with me, letting me go so they could hunt me again. When the first rays of sunlight finally broke through the canopy, the clearing was empty. I climbed down from the tree, my legs shaking so badly I could barely stand. The forest was silent again, but the feeling of being watched never left me. The walk back to Cedar Ridge was a blur. I don't remember how long it took or what direction I went. All I knew was that I had to keep moving. When I finally stumbled into town, I was a shadow of myself, clothes torn, face pale, eyes hollow. Sheriff Danner took one look at me and didn't ask questions. He knew. I didn't stay long. I didn't explain what I'd seen, and I didn't write a report. I left Cedar Ridge the next morning, swearing I'd never go back, but the forest didn't let me go. Even now, back in the safety of my apartment, I feel its presence. I see shadows move in the corners of my vision. I hear the faint echo of laughter in the wind. The locals call it the shadow. I call it a warning, because whatever lives in those woods isn't finished with me yet.